Pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Open Meetings Act, notice was given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter and of said city, would convene a regular meeting on Tuesday, November 9th, 2021 at 5 p.m. at the Brownsville Public Library Main Branch Meeting Room. Pursuant to Section 551.127 Texas Government Code, one or more commissioners or employees may attend this meeting remotely using video conferencing technology. The video and audio feed of the video conferencing equipment can be viewed and heard by the public at the address posted above as the location of the meeting. Members of the public, employees, and the city commission may join via the WebEx teleconference meeting links provided at the City of Brownsville Agenda Center. This notice and meeting agenda are posted online at the Agenda Center. and members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting hosted through WebEx teleconference can also join by the telephone numbers provided on the agenda. Members of the public who submitted a public comment form will be permitted to offer public comments as provided by the agenda and as permitted by the presiding officer during the meeting. A recording of the meeting will be made and will be available to the public in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. So it is now 5:02 PM and we can call the meeting to order. I show that we do have a quorum with all members present, except I show Commissioner Tetro is not present virtually or in person.
And Commissioner Tetro did just advise me that she is on her way.
Okay,
Go ahead and get started.
okay.
Call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the gavel. We're about now legitimate.
Okay, our next item is invocation.
Let's all stand and remain standing for the pledge after the prayer. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for the many blessings we have in the city of Brownsville. And most of all, we thank you for your love, your grace, and your mercy. Lord God, we ask you to help the individuals in our city. You know the needs of each individual far more than any of us do. And Lord, for this governing body and all governing bodies in our nation, we ask you to destroy any deceptions in the minds of those leaders and release your revelation so that we can move forward with what is best for our nation and our city. We ask you to lead, guide, and direct our mayor, city commissioners, and anyone presenting anything in this meeting today. And we ask all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And now let's take a short moment of silence where we can add our prayers to what has already been spoken. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
honor the Texas
Flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas,
one state.
state, under God, one and indivisible.
Our next item is proclamations. The first proclamation is proclamation designating Thursday, November 11th, 2021 as Veterans Day in the city of Brownsville. Mayor Trey Mendez and Commissioner Rose Gowan.
Is there anybody here that's going to accept this proclamation? If not, I'll just go ahead and read it. Oh, thank you, Pastor. Good. This is honoring you and anybody else that serves, so thank you. This is a proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, honoring City of Brownsville employees who are military veterans or active duty and all United States military veterans. Whereas honorable service performed in the defense of our nation is the highest form of citizenship. Whereas our nation's service members, past and present, and their families represent the very best of America, motivated by patriotism and love of country. Our soldiers serve at home and abroad with professionalism, ingenuity, integrity, and devotion. Whereas 113 City of Brownsville employees are veterans or current members of the armed forces, and the City of Brownsville will hold a Veterans Day celebration on November 10th, 2021 at the Brownsville Event Center. Whereas the willingness of our employees to give freely and unselfishly of themselves in service of our nation is a sacrifice on behalf of our entire city and our nation. Whereas in conjunction with Veterans Day on November 11th, 2021, the City of Brownsville is proud to recognize the men and women in our city, state, and nation who have served to protect our freedom. And whereas, with a spirit of gratitude, we honor our employees who are veterans or active duty, and we honor all veterans of the United States military forces. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, and on behalf of all of our citizens, do hereby proclaim that all City of Brownsville employees who are veterans or active duty be honored, and that all military veterans be honored. Done on this 9th day of November, 2021, by myself and the rest of the City Commission. For those of you that are veterans and everybody else that may be watching that has served its active duty, the 113 City of Brownsville employees, Thank you all very much.
Our next proclamation is proclamation designating Saturday, November 27th, 2021 as Small Business Saturday in the city of Brownsville. Mayor Trey Mendez and Commissioner Pedro Cardenas.
It's actually November 27th. You said 21st?
Oh, I'm sorry, November 27th, 2021.
Well, this is for the small businesses. As they said, Saturday, November 27th, 2021, as Small Business Saturday. Whereas the government of Brownsville, Texas celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. And whereas according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 31.7 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all firms with paid employees in the United States. Are responsible for 65.1% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2019. And whereas 88 of the US consumers feel a personal commitment to support small businesses in the wake of the pandemic. And 92% of small business owners have pivoted the way they do business to stay open during the pandemic. And whereas Brownsville supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and serve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the county, have endorsed this Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturdays. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Council of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, on behalf of all the citizens, do hereby designate Saturday, November 27th, 2021 as Small Business Saturdays, and further call upon the citizens of Brownsville to support local businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturdays and throughout the year. Done on this 9th of November, 2020. This is signed by the mayor and the whole city commission.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Our next item is our public comment period, and as of the 4 p.m. deadline, we did not receive any public comment forms.
Nobody signed up in person? Okay.
Our next item is work sessions. Item 1, COVID Memorial, A Forest Remembers Brownsville Beautification Committee. Oscar, are you there? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. How y'all doing today? Thank y'all for allowing me to speak. Thank you, commissioners and mayor in the city of Brownsville. So we're here to present a project that the Brownsville Beautification Committee has been working on. This is a COVID memorial for all the lives that we lost during this pandemic. The project's name is A Forest Remembers. The plan for the project would be to have a tree cove as a memorial for the lives lost, and it would be one in each district. So there would be a park in each district that would have a designated area for these trees and for this memorial. We are here to basically also request that, you know, if you have any input as to which park in your district you would like to see this on or this project be done at, so that you can also let us know and let us know your input. We still haven't, you know, selected the parks, or we still don't have a list of the parks, but, you know, that's why we would want your input. And also, the project will be funded through sponsorships, which we've been able to set up a website for anybody that would like to sponsor a tree, and as well as you know, to support the project. So we also would like to have a project manager for this, so that we can you know, speed up the process, as well as to make sure that we get it done as quickly as possible. But other than that, this is why we wanted to bring up this information, just so that you're all aware that this is one of the projects that we're working on. And I don't know if you have any comments or any questions.
Oscar, you referenced the website. There is some information regarding sponsorships, but you did mention a website. If you have that website, can you share that with us, please?
Yes, I don't have it with me just yet because I know it's something very recent that was done. But we can definitely, as soon as I get it myself, I'll go ahead and forward it to the commission.
Great, thank you.
So the committee, so you have this at your desk, and this is kind of a very poetic summary of why we want to do this. And on the back, it has the sponsorship levels for corporations or philanthropists or whatever. If you know of any entity or person that would like to donate, you can take this with you and send them our way. We will be working with parks to choose one particular tree in each park. So one park might have a Ratama and one park might have an Aqua, but the grove will be all the same trees so that it looks uniform. And folks can go and sit in the shade of these trees and remember their parent or their brother or their sister as a living legacy.
How far grown are these trees gonna be when they're planted?
We don't know. It
Okay.
it depends on how much money we raise, so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you for your time.
Our next work session, item 2, chapter 38, ethics ordinance and proposed amendments.
Mayor, Commissioners, this is titling this Part 2. Part 1, we're going to be voting on, have a public hearing and a vote today, this evening. Items that we still have to discuss are the two major ones, which are in blue, participation of city employees, city officials in economic development incentive programs, their family members, and then also know the last three really deal with preliminary panel qualifications, removal process, and then a summary dismissal power of the EAC for procedural matters. But before we kind of dive into that, I want to use the next slide just to kind of set a proposal that I'd like to present to the commission and how to unpack specifically the two major points. There is understanding that there is urgency. These are significant issues and we need to address them. But there's no quick fix. And as I was preparing for this presentation, just had this kind of picture of an iceberg. And yes, what we see on top is very significant and it needs to be addressed. But if we just shave away at the top and not address what's beneath, we're going to keep on having to deal with these issues. So with that, just wanted to remind the commission that, you know, having a focus on the long term in comparison to the short term relief that might be there to maybe expedite something quickly, it sometimes comes at a cost long term. Difficult situations require creative solutions, and that takes collaboration, engaging in different perspectives and bringing the right people to the table so that we address the issues appropriately. And then also something that I learned along the way is not just who you have, but who you need to go with you as well. So identifying key stakeholders that might be able to provide additional input. And also all this because we want to get it right. So the proposal I have is I'd like to really get the preliminary panel qualifications down, removal process for preliminary panel members, and summary dismissal powers for the EAC at this meeting. I think we can turn that out and have something, a draft, workable draft at the first meeting in December. And so we would do that in a work session along with our second reading and final adoption of Part 1 revisions. Then December 14th, I would present the first reading of those panel revisions and summary dismissal powers if we discuss those. And also a preliminary workshop for those two major components that we still have to discuss. And inviting key players, and I think BCIC, and I've had discussions with Josh at BCIC in relation to the Part 1 revisions, shared those revisions with him and also their legal counsel. They're in favor of those revisions, and I think they'd appreciate an opportunity to share some of the things that they are working on, in addition to address the the ethics issues. So that would happen, and it would give city commission a chance to give me direction on proposed language, and so also maybe ask for additional information that we might need. Then that would bring us to January 4th, which would be the second reading and adoption of the panel revisions, which we'll discuss today, along with an actual draft language of what those development revisions might be. And then January 18th, we would present a first reading of those development-related revisions with possible final reading and adoption at the first meeting in February. Depending how the conversations go, maybe the 15th for final adoption. And again, this is a proposal, but the commission, you drive the boat. And so I would highly recommend this, but we can speed it along as fast as you want. But my biggest recommendation is that we have the full discussion about those issues. And at the very end of this presentation, if we have time, I have some discussion points about the two big ones that I think we can maybe set an agenda, a full agenda, and have it very organized and hit all the big points, have the key players come in and have a good presentation for those two. Which brings us to the preliminary panel provisions. And in that, this is just a very high level. If you actually go to your agenda packet, this is kind of going forward with the public hearing and first reading of chapter 38. I included actual hard document, Word document about the whole chapter 38. And you can pull up chapter 38, section 190E for the entire language of that. But just high level. So the way the preliminary panel gets involved for those who just need a quick briefing is complaint is received within 21 days. The chair, vice chair, and they rotate. The city manager and city attorney convene as a panel, and their task is to determine whether the complaint states a claim under chapter 38 and whether that's supported by just cause. And I listed, it's defined, just cause is defined there. But the determination, if the panel determines, one, that either the complaint failed to state a claim under chapter 38 or just cause was absent, then the complaint must be dismissed. The determination does require for a vote of 2 of the 3 panel members. And there is a provision in there that if they're unable to serve due to conflict, then there's a drawing of lots by the city secretary of the sitting EAC to fill whoever's conflicted out. Now, in there, conflict is not defined, but as we'll go on, one of our discussion points is, should we define that? So here's where our discussion starts, and I'll go over the discussion points, and we can add more to these as we go along. But the first one is, I think both Commissioner Del Santos and the mayor, and maybe a few others, talked about the composition of preliminary panel, specifically when it's the case where the city commissioner is either a complainant or the person charged. And so we can discuss, what the vision is for that and revisions. Also, duties of the preliminary panel, do we want to keep it at a 3-person panel with affirmative vote of 2 of those 3? And also, I think where a lot of discussion will be is the conflict, maybe defining the conflict provision. And lastly, 2 points, removal of panel members for conflicts, but also empowering the EAC to have a final check on instances where there might be procedural deficiencies. We saw this in a recent case that came up where the panel allowed the complaint to go up to the evidentiary hearing, when in fact the allegation cited was not one listed that could be submitted for a complaint. And so in that case, having that authority with the EAC, they could have said, hey, we have the authority to cite summarily for procedural deficiency without going to have an evidentiary hearing. With that, those are the discussion points. We can go down them one by one, or we can add others. But at this point, I leave it up to the commission.
I have a question for you, Counselor. What type of training do the panel members receive for this role? if any?
In the past, they didn't, aside from every employee, at least city attorney and every employee has to at least read, acknowledge they've read the chapter 38. Now we also have an internal training, I believe it's like an hour-long session.
And I think that might solve some of the problems we encountered during this last case. I think if the panel had some guidance to say, in your role, these are the things you should look for, to say that there's absolutely just cause to move this on to the evidentiary hearing, I think that probably would help. Because I know everybody on the panel, they're reasonable people, but they may not have known what they should have been looking for on that. And from what I understood in that one, the panel was divided, right? It wasn't a unanimous decision to move it forward.
It was a 2-3, I believe, yeah,
2-1.
2-1.
Who's the panel now?
City manager, city attorney, and the chair or vice chair.
And they rotate.
Same as what's yours?
Same, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the second complaint that was filed early on. I think their first meeting was in February, and I think the complaint was filed in June. People were still getting informed.
Yeah, just considering the gravity of some of the things they'd consider, I think some type of training, preliminary training would be appropriate, and probably even for EAC members. I know we've got some folks with legal backgrounds, which is excellent, but we've also got some folks there just from an ethical and moral perspective, like the pastor, and who might benefit from some type of training.
And was it the, excuse me, the commission's kind of direction to also include like an automatic removal of panel members when it's, at least for the city manager and city attorney, when it's a city commission member, whether it's complainant or a person charged? Because we can, I'll make sure that's added.
Who would take the place of the city attorney?
So I think it would just be defined as a conflict. Because there is a provision that says when there's a conflict, that the city secretary will draw lots. And then out of the existing members of the EAC, and they'll serve on that preliminary panel for that one event.
That works.
Are we still good with the makeup of a three-person preliminary panel? And what about, so,
Can I just bring something up, because I'm thinking about that scenario through. Might it, well, if it's someone from the city commissioner or city management, if we do it still with a preliminary panel, might it not better to just go straight to a hearing so that it's public instead of then waiting, in order to avoid then maybe saying, oh, well, you know, they got by because these people were appointed by them, you know?
Well, but the point of that preliminary thing is to vet whether or not there's any legitimacy to it. Otherwise, you don't want it to get to the second stage if there's nothing there.
Correct, but then it's very easy to say, well, because it's the city commission involved or executive management, that's why they didn't have a proper hearing and they summarily dismissed it. Because that happens also, or is that a public hearing, the preliminary panel?
preliminary panel's not.
Happens just because one of our main important points is transparency. And so if that were to happen and it gets dismissed at the preliminary panel, which I'm thinking like most of the complaints might be without merit or little merit. But just for the sake of transparency and so that it doesn't look like we're hiding things. But that's just a thing, something that occurred to me.
And I really think that this, it's a really good point, and it actually made me think that, and I'll ask the commission for direction. So when the conflict, the conflict and the switching of panel members is going to be when it's the city attorney, city manager, or city commissioners. Now to the point of whether it should go straight to the evidentiary hearing, I really think that it's going to have its own checks, because the reason why I think we're talking about this last case that came up, it was just I think a misreading of the code. But now that I think we're going to have more training hopefully a more informed preliminary panel and EAC is that that'll be evident in what is listed as the possible complaints that can be filed against somebody. This last one, it was just very clear that it wasn't.
Because it's freedom of speech.
Yeah, so it's more likely than not, it's gonna get past preliminary panel unless it's pretty like just.
Yeah, and on this last one, it wasn't really a freedom of speech issue, Commissioner. It was that within chapter 38, you've got sort of the introduction that talks about, you know, a public servant or public official should do this and do that and emulate certain types of things. And then it goes into no conflict, no financial interest, no this, no that. Everything that was part of the complaint was from the intro. There was no allegation of an actual violation.
It was a principle of conduct.
Right.
And then there's a later provision that says essentially principles of conduct are not an actionable offense. And so it got through and it shouldn't have, and that was, you know, we're going to be more informed, better educated. Hopefully that won't happen again. But I do think the way we've kind of talked about setting it up, I think that will alleviate some of those concerns.
And another question, Counselor, and only because I hadn't thought about this before. I know once you get to the evidentiary hearing portion, double jeopardy applies for some of the things that have come out as part of that complaint, correct?
Correct, yeah.
What about at the preliminary panel? If the preliminary panel dismisses, does double jeopardy apply?
I don't think that's clear in the code.
That might be
I
something,
really don't think it is.
one of the future iterations.
So how so though? Like, do we want it to be? I think what he's saying is because once you bring up, a set of facts and it's gone through the preliminary panel, it goes to evidentiary hearing and there's a determination, you can't go back and try it again. Right? So
Actions.
for the same action, same facts, once the decision's final. So I think what the question is, want to establish that the same, at the preliminary panel, wherein maybe they alleged, like in this case, at chapter 38, on the principles of conduct with a certain set of facts, but they got the pleading wrong, like a better way of saying it. So do they get to come back and do the same facts, but under a different violation code
And if we don't, then how many times can they do that for the same action?
for the same facts, right?
I think there should be some language then talking about the same facts or series of events that should nullify any future filings.
So then we run into the problem that John had, so maybe if the claim under which you were alleging was not strong enough to pass muster, it didn't really negate the fact that there was something there, like, that was a tricky one.
I understand what you're saying, but was kind of the bite at the apple and it was a full evidentiary hearing. It just that the process itself it's in a way flawed because of the way it was presented.
Now, if we're talking about something at the preliminary panel level, I'd be agreeable to if the rest of the commission is. I know sometimes in the justice system, it can be dismissed with prejudice or dismissed without prejudice. I'm not sure if that's discretion we want to give the preliminary panel in that case, but something to think about.
No, I think in the interest of transparency, whatever, if the panel decides to rule that there was no cause, that they should issue a statement, a written statement to that effect and reasons why. Because if, the panel just says no cause and it's just a verbal thing or whatever, we don't get to see the rationale behind it or, I think that's an important point.
Does the panel meet to make that determination, or do they independently review and make their determinations and then we see if it's 2 or 3 in favor?
The past practice, and this is what I've been told, is that they met.
Okay.
But I haven't participated myself in one of them. So I think it's just a practice, which I would recommend we meet.
I agree. And I think to Commissioner Galonsky's point, if it's someone, a high-ranking official, I wouldn't even be opposed to the preliminary panel being public.
I'd avoid a lot of,
Absolutely.
I like the the issuing of a statement, as Commissioner Cowan said.
You also don't want to weaponize the
Exactly.
bringing of a
Yeah.
complaint and make it public, just like if, let's just say somebody brings a complaint against you, Commissioner,
True.
and it's totally bogus. Somebody weaponizes it against you because of, let's say, your orientation, right? Let's just say,
Good.
and it becomes public, just because they brought it against you.
Mhm.
It's a weapon, and it's false.
That's valid.
So that, I mean, if there's no merit, there's no merit.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be
it should
public.
be just a statement. I
Just a
think
statement.
would be great.
So I have adding language relating to the same facts or series of events, and then also adding a written statement component for the preliminary panel, along with those defining the conflicts to allow for the drawing of lots when it's a city commission, member, city attorney, or city manager.
Yeah, on that same note, I would disagree with not going through the preliminary panel when it's somebody from the commission, because exactly the same thing would happen as what the mayor just said. Because you would know it'd go public, and I don't think it should go public if it has no merit to it. I think the preliminary panel, even if it's a city commissioner, is important. That's my point.
Okay.
You just have to have faith in the process. If you have, those three arbiters are honest and they're gonna look at it neutrally. Obviously, if it's somebody from the commission, then it's gonna be two other members of the panel that we appoint ourselves.
Right.
So we have to have faith in the process that those people are gonna be neutral and look at it with that eye.
And you also have the component of it being a drawing of lots, so you don't know who's going to be the actual person sitting on.
And with that being said, if you make, I mean, what you can make public is their findings, right?
Correct.
Doesn't go through because of this.
Correct.
I think that'll give it at least the transparency we're trying to get.
I think we have some good direction and some good safeguards, additional safeguards.
I just asked because I don't know, in the last hearing, the person who was complained against? Or were you like the arbiter?
No, I wasn't. At that point, this last one, I was just the advisor to the board as to whether they kind of went outside their scope, and I let the panel ask the questions.
But neither party had legal representation in that case.
So that brings, we do have some more time. Thank you for everybody's input. This is where I'd like to develop maybe an agenda for our next meeting and permission to kind of bring in representatives from BCIC to participate in this discussion as well. So we have the discussion about participation by city employees and city officials in economic development incentive programs, and also would that apply to their family members. And I've included some discussion points in here, which I would like to add to the agenda. I can take them off if you think they're not relevant, or I could add more that you think would lend itself to the discussion. The first one is for us to define the limits by which city employees will be prohibited from participating. I think that's a good line to discuss. Also, to define the term of when past city employees or elected officials may be allowed to participate in the future. And also define which of the economic development incentives that employees and elected officials will be precluded from participating. I reached out to Josh over at BCIC kind of late this afternoon. And I asked him if he would be interested in kind of participating in that discussion. I explained some of the economic development incentive tools that I'm aware of. But he said that they actually have some technical assistant programs that they offer to residents as well that we might want to discuss whether that prohibition applies to those programs as well. And lastly, to discuss whether it's a participation or disclosure of conflicts issue that we would like to resolve. And so that's just kind of discussion points that I think would need to be kind of fleshed out. If you think some of those should be removed or some should be added.
What do you mean by historic preservation grant? Are you talking about historic, my house is or my building is historic or it's not?
No, just, I believe, in talking with Josh, there are just some other like historic rehabilitation grants that are available out there.
I think it needs to be clarified.
Yeah,
Yes. That these, like, for example, public-private loans, very ambiguous, third-party grants, ambiguous. So I think it needs to be clarified that these are incentives that are administered through the city or one of the 4A or 4Bs. Because otherwise, it can be construed as, well, if you get a loan from a bank, then you're violating this. So it needs
Sure,
to be
yeah, a good point.
clarified that it's
Right.
things that are administered through the city or 4A, 4Bs.
And historic designation of a building is a state, federal thing. It's not just a local thing.
Right. We'll get that clarified first.
I don't think as we move forward with this, and I think the majority of us are in agreement that, I don't think we're looking for a blanket policy. That under no circumstances is any city employee eligible for any type of grant. I know personally, when I think about it, and I know in some of the discussions we've had, it's if an employee is in the department that's handling the grant, that employee is directly hands-on with that grant program. That's something we should absolutely look at for not being eligible. But to say any employee of the city of Brownsville shouldn't be eligible for grant, even though they have nothing to do with those funds in any way, shape, or form, or their family members by extension. I don't think that's where we're wanting to go as a city.
I agree. If you exclude all city employees and all of their families and all board members, you're talking about thousands of people.
Mhm.
And that's not the purpose of
I mean,
what we should be doing.
it would make no sense to have Parks and Rec not be able to apply for anything like that, basically. They're not looking at it. It would make no sense.
Right.
And of course, I mean, we'll get, I think some of the others will require some more discussion. But as a set of discussion points for our next meeting, which we'll bring in Josh and maybe some other representatives from BCIC to join the discussion. Would you like to see any additional points discussed?
Well, I just want to say that there are a lot of people in this organization that come here and work really hard and never consider, I don't know how to say this correctly, contribute a lot to the organizations. And we really appreciate those employees. I just really want to take this time to thank those people.
Sure, I mean, at the heart of this, what you're really trying to do is you're really trying to eliminate somebody receiving a benefit because of their position. And I think you're also trying to eliminate somebody receiving any sort of benefit because of specialized knowledge or participating in the process or creation of a program. I mean, at the heart of this, I think that's really what we're trying to do. I think you need to be really careful. And I've told you this and I mentioned this about overcorrection. So I think that the city employees is kind of overcorrection unless they themselves are participating in the process or are involved in the administration of those monies. Also, I think that family members is a very broad term that can punish people that have nothing to do with any of this. Like, I mean, I can understand a spouse or domestic partner because in theory, you're gonna receive a benefit if you're a commission member, but I think any family member really gets too broad. I mean, how far removed do we want to do this, right?
Right.
I mean, you want to eliminate the benefit portion where somebody is gonna benefit from, like what we discussed, specialized knowledge, position, or involvement in the process itself.
But not the overcorrection like we talked about.
Oh, right, but I mean, I don't think you want to punish a cousin or a sibling that's not in the same household. I think it just really thinking it through. Spouse and domestic partner makes all the sense in the world. Parent or child may, if it's in the same household or involves a business that a commission member has an interest in, I think that makes sense. But just to blanketly cover family members is too broad.
It's too broad and it will give another reason not to run for elected office. And we have trouble getting people to run for elected office to begin with.
And there's certain levels right now of consanguinity and affinity that we already use and apply to board appointments and things of that nature, correct?
Yes, sir.
And maybe looking at something like that, and again, not as a blanket for the entire city or for any elected official, but again, for the folks directly involved, hands-on with that money and administering the program.
I think the other distinction is that there's financial benefit as these often are, but there's also educational benefit. So for instance, if I want to go get a business advice from eBridge that is not actually money coming into my pocket, but there's a staff member that's advising me on how to make a business plan, I don't see the harm in that as opposed to, and because it's an educational thing that should be available to all of us.
It's more like a city service.
It's a
Yeah,
service.
absolutely.
Service.
So making the distinction, the financial benefits, we can kind of delve into these, to the conflicts, right? Having, and even with family members within the same household, those with specialized knowledge or position or influence in creating our, the program. But then we also have, like you're saying, this component of educational benefits that everybody could benefit from. That the commission wouldn't be opposed to the commission members or other family members from participating. Is that what I gather? As far as the educational, as long as it's educational component, not the financial.
And then what about the loan component? So eBridge has a loan feature, so it's not a grant. I'm not keeping the money and not paying it back. It's a loan, just like you go to the bank. So that's another layer of distinction as well.
I think it goes to the mayor's point about, is there an economic benefit that individual, the elected official or the city employee receives that's not available to everybody else? And in that case, I think the loans are applicable to everybody that meets the criteria.
It's like if you went to a bank.
Right. Whereas if it's more competitive, I think that's where you have maybe some influence asserted. Okay, I think I have a good outline of discussion points, and I think it'd be interesting to hear BCIC's input as well.
On the BCIC part, or let's say even GBIC, anytime that there's an application involving some sort of entity, corporate entity or some sort of corporate structure, the members and percentage interest should be disclosed in the application.
Yeah, I would say all members,
Right.
not just members above a certain percentage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, every member.
Yeah, we can add that. All right, and commissioners, mayor, that's staff. Does anybody else have any other points?
I feel on the right track. I know it's a lot of work and, all those meetings, it's a way to shorten it, please.
No, I understand. I just want to make sure we get it right. And when you're dealing with passing language, I just want to make sure I get the correct language for you guys.
Expect everybody to come, so
Yes,
done correctly.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we know from the IOP, I certainly have no issues with being deliberate and looking at things carefully. But I also want to make sure we get it right.
Yes, sir.
Our next item is consent agenda items 1 through 7.
Take a motion on the consent agenda.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Well, our next item is public hearings. Item number 1, public hearing and action on first reading on ordinance number 2021-1693 to annex into the city of Brownsville boundary limits a property described as being 35.468 acres of land more or less comprised of 2.107 acres out of lot 3 and 33.361 acres out of lot 6, block 409, El Jardín re-subdivision of parts of shares 23, 25, 28, 29, 30, and 31. Espiritu Santo Grant, Cameron County, Texas, recorded in volume 4, page 48 of the Cameron County Map Records in Cameron County, Texas, Planning and Redevelopment Department.
So I would like to disclose that I have a conflict of interest with public hearing number 1 and number 2, so I'm going to step outside of the building because of the sound, and so if someone can come get me when these two are done.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Noted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. As mentioned, this is a voluntary petition to annex 5.468 acres into city limits. It is a petition by G&H Investments. And this area will be home to a future single-family residential development. It will consist of 111 lots, and it is fronting Boca Chica Boulevard and Medford Avenue. So under TLGC Chapter 43, home rule municipalities may annex under voluntary petition. We did send out the corresponding notices, mail outs. We did advertise in the newspaper, so everything was followed accordingly to the Texas Local Government Code. This is the aerial map of the area that is to be annexed. As mentioned, it is fronting Boca Chica and Medford. It is, there's already some single-family subdivisions in the area.
I'm sorry, where's Medford?
Medford is a bit to the east of the airport,
Okay.
Close to Brown.
Okay.
And so this is the proposed layout of the subdivision.
Is that plat going to be approved separately or has it been approved already?
It's in the process of, actually, the master plan has already been approved. It's going to be a multi-phase development since it's a very large amount of lots. So it will be phased out. Right now, we are working on phase one. So the developer did sign an agreement that it will be developed. They will be responsible for installing the infrastructure. So based on this information, staff does recommend the approval to annex into the city limits.
I'm very excited about this because right now there's a very big housing shortage, but I just hope that the city would be very adamant to make sure that there's sidewalks with good walking space and good walkability in those neighborhoods, because the neighborhoods that we have in that area with Mars and the other areas that connect to Medford, I've been out there recently. And it's just cars parked everywhere and there's no room for kids to play, so they play in the streets and it's very dangerous. But I'm excited to see this, especially with all of the development and excitement with people are looking for homes over there. So this is gonna be great for the city and obviously the tax revenue that it's gonna generate. But I would just really, really ask you, one, to be on top of them with the infrastructure, with the flooding issues, because as you know that we already have with Medford. And then two, just to really, really please make sure that they have a good plan in place when it comes to recreational spots for kids and the sidewalks and just making sure that there's not tons of cars parked everywhere and it's just a dangerous overall.
Yes, and to respond to those concerns, part of the subdivision process is to address the sidewalks. We do require the sidewalk plan. So they have submitted that. They will be installing the sidewalks as per the requirement of the UDC.
Is there services that run out there already?
Yes, they run along Medford and Boca Chica.
Okay, and then typically this service plan, this is the first time I see this on annexation. Is that typical?
Yes. It's,
Okay. Okay.
And I want to reiterate Commissioner Tetri's comments, flooding. We keep annexing subdivisions where homeowners are going to be experiencing flooding, and I think that's a problem. So let's make sure, I know our standards are low right now, and that's something we need to address as a city. Let's make sure they are not cutting any corners when it comes to drainage and flooding.
Commissioner.
That Medford area has typically been an area of concern, I guess, because of just the way that it was structured. It's former irrigation and agriculture property, so it floods very easily. So obviously, our standards are not what they should be when it comes to drainage, but well, what they say, but good luck to these homeowners, and this is exciting. Hopefully that we'll have people that are in apartments now who will be able to be first-time homeowners in these neighborhoods.
There's a picture there with the orange area. You find that? Yeah. Is that water or what is that?
No, there's actually a drainage ditch along Medford where the actual pin is at. It's barren land. That's why it looks like water.
I know what Matamoros did, and I don't think we should do that. Right? Just cover the Resaca's and now we got flooding everywhere.
All concrete.
Or concrete.
Yeah, the drainage system over there is just ditch over ditch, and so you get one mattress and it's a disaster. So hopefully it's done correctly. That's all I ask.
Yes, Commissioner.
Does that drainage ditch connect to where?
I wouldn't exactly be able to tell you. I know it's owned by Cameron County Drainage District Number 1. So I would say it connects to one of the main drains.
And do you evaluate the flooding aspect? Because two commissioners already have noted concerns about flooding. Is that something you look at when you're asking for the development and engineering aspect of this?
That would be part of the engineering department's review.
Okay.
Yeah, I think on the plat, it specifically said flood zone right across where all the homes are.
What says flood zone X? That's just.
Right, so
I believe that ditch connects to the one where Austin Road and eventually it travels out to the channel.
So
Number 1.
all flood zone maps were updated by FEMA recently. Actually all subdivisions have flood zone written on them to denote what particular flood zone they're in. So whether it be AH or all the way to X, which is the highest elevation, it's just to show the level the ground is at. Now, if it's at a very low level, then engineering will walk the developer through for example, the Loma process to elevate the land.
Yeah, flood zone X is actually it's one of the least,
Prone to flooding.
yes.
Yeah, but that's part of the due diligence from the department, right?
The reason I asked about the drainage ditch is because if it is drainage district number 1, it should, I think, lead back to the park that they built.
Cascade.
Yeah. And eventually, in a perfect world, we'll have trails along all of those drainage ditches leading to that park. So not that there's anything they need to do now, but developers hopefully will be told that so that they can perhaps protect some right of way. That would make it possible in the future to build a trail along that drainage ditch and eventually take those people to Cascade Park and other parts of the city.
Right, and in collaboration with engineering, we look at future factors to try and avoid these concerns.
If you look at that one, check it out. Because if it does connect, then it should be thought of.
And again, this is the annexation phase of it, and the subdivision process will encompass.
I'm not objecting, I'm just thinking out loud.
Will the subdivision phase come back to us or no?
No, subdivision, they are not heard by the city commission. It's only by the planning and zoning commission.
Oh, that's ironic. Wasn't trying. Sorry.
Do we have any other questions or concerns from the commission? All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody here that we should speak on this item?
Those public hearings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Do we have a motion on the item?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Item 2, public hearing and action on first reading on ordinance number 2021-1694 to annex into the city of Brownsville boundary limits a property described as being 42.98 acres located in Lot 4, Block 202 of El Jardín subdivision as recorded in Volume 4, page 48 of the map records of Cameron County, Texas, Planning and Redevelopment Department.
So again, this is a voluntary annexation petition. It is for 42.984 acres. It's also going to be by the same developer. It's a residential subdivision for 244 lots. This one is fronting Southmost Boulevard and South Dakota Avenue. And again, the process was the same. There was a development agreement, correct advertisement and mailouts, and also mailouts to the taxing jurisdictions, school districts, and public entities. This is the aerial map. As you can see to the north of Southmost Boulevard, this area is mainly undeveloped, but there is some existing single-family subdivisions within the area.
We should look those taxes from stripes
So a bird's eye view,
right outside.
again, a multi-phase development. Right now, already working also on phase one. And staff recommends approval to annex the 42.984 acres into the city limit, into the city of Brownsville limits.
So this 42 acres, will have to provide services, running water and sewer? Do we already provide service, well, do we already have connection to that area?
There is, that area is actually serviced by El Jardín and, for water and,
Magic Valley.
sewer is Magic Valley for electricity and sewer is PUB. So there are lines that run in front of the property.
Does that satisfy the threshold of what we would have to do?
In what sense? Oh, yes. So it runs right in front. They would just have to extend into the property to provide utilities for each and every lot that is developed.
And that's our cost or their cost?
It's their cost.
Okay.
Yes. Since they are the interested party in subdividing, they would have to be the ones who provide the improvement. That's part of the development agreement.
How far is this from the tactical training center?
I want to say about 2 miles.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there wasn't any restrictions in regards to
Yes.
that would affect this.
Yes, no. There's quite a bit of distance in between.
Does this touch the Southmost Nature Trail path?
I would not be able to tell you that off the top of my head.
So I know that's not why you're here, but I would ask that planning check that because I do think that developments built on a trail should provide access
Access
to
to
the
it.
trail.
Noted.
So now you know to be prepared for this question next time. Next time you have a similar.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
so
It's important.
it is important because Southmost is not a walkable area.
Right.
And it's very hard, as you guys know, to retrofit Southmost into a walkable area. So trails proactively are one of the only ways to make it walkable. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but if P and Z does not anticipate these things, when that happens, then it gets missed.
Noted. Any other questions?
Any other questions or concerns?
I move to close.
No, it could be open to public hearing.
Hold on. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak on this item? All right, now we can close.
Move to close.
We have a motion to close. Is there
Second.
a motion and a second? Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. We have a motion on the item.
Move to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Can somebody get Commissioner Glass?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, public hearing and action on first reading of ordinance number 2021-1653B, providing for amendments to Chapter 38 of the city's Code of Ordinances, including A, providing for a defined process of selecting outside legal counsel, B, expanding applicability of Chapter 38 to include the city's 4A and 4B economic development corporations, C, expanding financial disclosure requirements to include the city's 4A and 4B economic development corporation boards, Public Utility Board, Board of Adjustment, Building and Standards Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the city auditor. D, creating subpoena authority to compel witnesses and discovery. And E, adding clarifications that reflect the Ethics Advisory Commission's ability to deliberate in closed session. City Attorney.
Mayor, Commissioners, this is the final draft that you guys directed us to write up. Just as a summary, I think the major changes, comments that were added at the last meeting were to add the Building and Standards Commission to those being required to file a financial disclosure we made the clarifications to the subpoena power. We talked about the two-step process with issuance and the actual enforcement of it. And so we added an exclusion on the city commission 75% vote that the complainant and the person charged, if a city commission member, would not be included in that 75%. Added that. And then we added on the rotating list of outside counsel, we included conflict of interest provisions that we outlined in subsection 2. And that's all provided in your packet. I'll take any questions, any notes for clarification.
On the subpoenas, I noticed it says limited to a city official or employee. Is that enough for what the commission's needing to do their job? And I'm thinking back to one of the cases earlier this year. It involved an outside business or consulting company that the person who the complaint was against had been a party affiliated with before. Would it not be appropriate that the commission have the ability to subpoena records from that company?
Yeah, that's good.
This says it's appropriate. It just says that it's a certain heightened standard, right?
Yeah, we could use. Read that again. I can make that more reflective to just, because it's a compelling of witnesses and or records.
And that's what I'm thinking about is when it comes to the records, do we want to limit ourselves to just a city employee? Or do we want to say we can serve a subpoena on a bank to produce bank records or a business to produce business records that are related to the case?
That's a decision whether the commission wants to go that far and do that. Because right now we're just.
Broad enough. It doesn't state, because then if you start putting in banks or other specific entities, then by the language, you're kind of being unambiguous when it comes to those things, which would exclude others. You may be better off with a broader language. How is it now, Victor?
It's a city official employee. We can put witnesses or parties.
But in regards to records, it discusses just records.
Just records, correct?
Okay. So that would seem to leave it open.
Is it? And
the first,
understand that.
yeah. And so the first sentence of that, it cites compelling witnesses and records. The second sentence makes it a little bit more specific. And it says the AC must, on the 75% vote, may issue the subpoenas against city official or employee compelling their attendance and our production of data. So I can just make that consistent with the first sentence.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think so. I want to see the final version, but
Yes, and if you approve this today, it'll be subject to that one revision, and then at the second reading, that's the purpose for bringing it twice. I'll make it.
Any other concerns?
let's see on my notes. And I just wanted to make sure I was reading right when it talked about the penalty for failing to comply with the subpoena. When it says excluding any members that are either the complainant and or the person, that's just with regard to the 75%, correct?
Correct.
But we can impose a penalty on anyone who refuses to comply with the subpoena, okay? Should we have, and this might be a training issue or something type of workshop for the commission, do we want it to just be arbitrary? Say, no, I don't believe we should issue subpoenas against anyone, so I'm voting no fine, even though they're refusing to comply. Should I, as a commissioner, be doing that, just exercising that judgment, or should it be that? And I know with some boards, for example, there's a standard. You've got to meet this threshold to be able to exercise discretion. Do we want to say that there has to be some type of standard met to say that the subpoena was issued erroneously, did not rise to the level for this commission to say that we're not going to impose a fine? Or should it be completely arbitrary at the commission level?
I think you want to leave the commission the flexibility to do that because the thing is in defining things that fine is that then you put yourself in a corner where you can't react otherwise. That'd be my recommendation, sir.
That works. And 38-196 C2D. 96. C2D. The attorney or its law partners, employees, or intern has a substantial economic interest with a city official, city employee, complainant, or any witness related to the complaint. Do we want to add city of Brownsville to that?
Where, sir?
On D, outside legal counsel conflicts of interest, an attorney shall not be assigned to a case where, and right now it reads, the attorney or its law partners, employees, or interns has a substantial economic interest with a city official, city employee, complainant, or any witness related to the complaint. And this is just a question. I'm good either way, but do we want to say also a substantial economic interest with the city of Brownsville?
As an entity?
If we think it's appropriate.
I think in that case, they're already going to be conflicted out by a state statute.
Okay, that works. Does chapter 38 address when a complaint may be against the city attorney, his recusal, and who takes the role that he fills? Because in some of these things, it talks about the city attorney making a decision or the city attorney doing this or that. Do we address in chapter 38 when he's got a conflict out, who steps into that role?
Yes, I think, and we're also going to attack it at the preliminary panel now as well with those proposed revisions. And this also, let me see where I can cite to you. There's a provision on that 196 further up. If not, Commissioner, I'll make sure it's clarified.
Thank you. And should there be, or is chapter 38 the right place? If we've got a city employee that the commission issues a subpoena to who fails to comply, I know we've got the latitude to impose a $500 penalty. Should there also be repercussions related to their employment with the city?
That's already identified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Within the evidentiary hearing process.
Say that one more time.
So if there's a finding against the person charged,
Mhm.
the EAC can issue a directive for this city manager to kind of deal with it, deal with the city employee matter. That's already established in the.
Even for refusal to comply with the subpoena?
Yeah, okay, so if they refuse, I wouldn't touch that because you're dealing with employment and like civil compliant.
Their employer.
Yeah.
Or we are their employer.
We're his employer.
But
He's,
also here's the thing, I don't want it to be a retaliatory
Yeah.
employment action.
That makes sense.
But you keep the civil penalty, it keeps it split.
Very good. That answers my questions.
Other questions or concerns? This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here on the side of?
motion to close public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to close. Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Items for individual consideration. Item 1, consideration and action to approve a professional services agreement with Freeze and Nichols for the following professional services: land use assumptions report, urban planning services, and unified development code updates as permitted under Texas Local Government Code 252.022, Section 4, Planning and Redevelopment Department.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the commission. I'm here to visit with you this evening to seek your approval to engage the services of Freeze and Nichols to perform land use study and a capital improvements plan update as part of a capital improvements plan update for PUB's water and sewer system. Chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Code. I think we have a presentation, I'm not sure, but Chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Code authorizes municipalities to assess impact fees against development to finance capital improvements, and that can be done for water and wastewater, drainage and transportation impact fees. In the city of Brownsville, you've only elected to exercise your water and sewer impact fees and authorize PUB to assess those against development. As part of adopting impact fees under the state statute, you are required to update the land use assumption and the CIP every 5 years. That's the PUB CIP in accordance with Chapter 395. As part of the impact fee process, PUB is required to adopt a capital improvement plan. They establish service areas to determine the cost for that particular service area, and then create land use assumptions based on trends to determine future growth patterns. They're required, when the fees are adopted, public hearings are required to adopt the land use assumptions and the capital improvement plans. There is a capital improvements advisory committee that's required, that is in place. Finally, the land use assumptions and CIP are required to be approved by the city commission. The purpose behind a future land use plan as part of the impact fee study is to plan for the efficient use of land and infrastructure, and to integrate land use planning and transportation, open space, trail, natural resource preservation, economic development, and housing planning, all comprehensively to look at future. The underlying purpose is to encourage development decisions that are predictable, fair, and fiscally responsible, which fits right in line with our Unified Development Code to give developers and investors land use predictability, investment predictability. And so the impact fee study is an additional tool to help create that predictability. Impact fees may be assessed anytime during the subdivision platting or building permitting. And the state statute does provide for impact fee exemptions for affordable housing, and you do exercise that option here through an ordinance, and we commonly waive impact fees for the housing authority. The PUB will be funding the land use report portion of the impact fee update prepared by Freeze and Nichols in the amount of approximately $66,000. In addition to the land use study, the City Commission engaged Freeze and Nichols in October of 2019 to prepare the Unified Development Code. The code was adopted December 4th of 2020, and the contract with Freeze and Nichols expired. The city staff undertook the process of developing a zoning map and going through the city lot by lot and block by block to develop the zoning map that the City Commission adopted. So we set aside the calibration and the updates to the code, and we didn't have our eye on the ball to make sure that contract didn't expire. So we need authorization to re-enter the contract to allow Freeze and Nichols to complete the edits and updates to the Unified Development Code. So we're also seeking authorization to do that and consolidate the two projects into one contract.
Okay, I did have a question on that because I did see that, and I was kind of confused. It's like, well, on costs and all that. So what said the contract expired? So there was still some things that were left undone under the contract?
Well, the code is complete, but we always anticipated there would
Right.
edits required, and local calibrations is now we're starting to hear issues about parking lots and so forth. So we're asking Freeze and Nichols to assist us with those final revisions.
So is that cost wise, is that part of the original contract?
We're not requesting authorization to exceed the original budget. If there's still funding remaining, since the staff assumed the responsibility for the development of the zoning map, funding is still available in the project.
That's a clarification I had because I saw the same amount. So I was kind of wondering, wait a minute.
No, we're not going to go now.
Okay. And then, second, Noel, typically when we have items on the agendas, we talk about whether or not they're budgeted. Is this one didn't have that indication, so is it?
It's in the list of one-time items. We did budget for it.
Okay.
We also put a parentheses that PUB would reimburse it, so.
Okay, but you know what I'm saying? Because,
Oh, yeah, we put as budgeted here,
yeah, but it's not
language,
on here.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, but it is budgeted, right? So it's more of a pass-through cost with PUB funding this. PUB was going to do this work last year. They actually waited for us to finish the UDC and then coordinate on doing one land use update.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have that language going forward. It's important because if we know that it's already budgeted, it makes it kind of easier fiscally to make that decision.
Yeah, I think the issue was not so much the financial impact, but more so the land use assumptions report and what that will provide the commission. Because it is going to be a different approach. Where I think years ago, I don't recall the year. I think the city opted to reduce the fees. Only PUB has really been following the water wastewater impact fee recommendations.
Right, and there's different prices for different areas because they want to kind of.
Right, they have a tiered structure. We have more of an arbitrary flat fee that's not supported by the former land use assumption. So I think for drainage and roadway, we talk about drainage a lot. We lack a mobility plan. So the issue will be, how do we want to proceed with using land use impact fees appropriately? They really are a growth management tool. And now that we've talked more about growth management and looking at the north and making sure that growth covers its cost. Impact fees are designed to support that and to mitigate, not so much affect growth, but allow growth to be mitigated by covering its cost. So that's what the land use assumptions report will provide.
How does that compare to the Virginity one? Is that something similar?
Actually, it's a great point. They're connected. I think what the Virginia report talked about, there was a concept in there about the fiscal shift. If you recall that a lot of the growth has gone north, well, land is cheap. That's just the economics. But then too, when you don't have these this is a growth management tool. What you don't want to have is the current community subsidizing the cost of growth, especially as you go north. So what the land use will do is it'll keep growth honest. It'll ensure that developers are paying the fair share of what we've programmed into their respective land uses as being the cost of public infrastructure. And they pay their fair share up front. So we will need to identify that. There's an engineering science to this. So that's kind of why the state requires that this be defensible, so to speak, based on CIP, based on land use planning, and that's how those fees are derived. So yeah, so when we get this done, it'll be a great conversation to have because, again, we want to make sure that growth is accounting for its cost, especially as we continue growing to the north.
Thanks. Any other questions or concerns? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Item 2, consideration and action to award a contract RFQ number PAS-60-921 for project audit services to Carr, Riggs, and Ingram LLC in the amount of $162,000, Financial Services Department.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Commissioners. The city is seeking independent audit for PUB's Tenasca. The city developed a request for qualifications. We advertised mid-July. RFQs closed August 3rd. Evaluation committee started the evaluations. Finalists were chosen and negotiations started September 27th. The contract finalized with Carr, Riggs, and Ingram on August 7th. Carr, Riggs, and Ingram presented to the Audit and Oversight Committee November 5th and approved. The estimated cost for this project is about $162,000 with a timeline, about four-month timeline to complete the project. Upon approval, funding for this will be provided through a mid-year budget amendment. We have representatives from Carl Riggs and Ingram on Zoom and present. Do you have any questions?
When you said that you were presenting an audit for Tenasca, I was already gonna make the motion. I'll make the motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'm not sure if y'all are aware, but I sat on the board of PUB from 2013 to 2019 when I was elected. During that time, Carl Riggs and Ingram was PUB's external auditor. So I don't know if that presents a conflict in that respect, or just so that you know, they have already been paid by PUB funds to audit the organization. They are, at that point, I think now it's Baker Tilly, but at that point, they would do external audits. I'm also going to vote against it simply because we've already spent enough money trying to do this before. Now it's the second bite at the apple. It's not just the city's expenses, but it's also PUB ratepayers having to defend the organization in this inquisition. You have to keep in mind that PUB goes through rating agencies who delve into their books and are well aware of the Tenasca project and what its failure. PUB has its own internal auditor. They had an external audit by Carl Ingram all those years, and nothing has ever come up. This project was started at the end of 2012, and it tentatively ended, like 2019, 18, 19? I mean, how long is this going to last? So I think y'all should be aware of it. This is not cheap, and we're going in circles and nothing has come up. If something bad would have happened, I don't know what new information you expect to collect, but this is my opinion. I know that you're entitled to your opinion, and so I just thought I'd provide that background in case you weren't aware.
Thanks, Commissioner. I know we have a couple gentlemen from Carl Riggs Ingram here. Can you gentlemen address this question about the prior work that performed for PUB?
I think we have Mr. Lead Partner with Quentin Anderson on Zoom that he might be able to answer that question.
He's from another firm?
No, he's the lead partner with Carl Riggs and Ingram.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yes, so, yes, Commissioners, I'm in attendance along with our forensic team specialist, John Paul Tujak, and in the audience with you is Jonathan Hall. Through our, with our previous predecessor firm, Long Chilton, we had previously been involved in the audits of the PUB and the city. There's nobody on this engagement team that had any participation in that, but the scope of the services that you requested in this proposal were forensic services in accordance with, you know, the IACPA standards on for forensic services, and that what was proposed, and which is different than an audit of financial statements. Involves a whole lot of additional procedures that were requested specifically in your RFQ, none of which have been performed by certainly not by us and not by anyone else that I'm aware of. But that was the scope of this project and the proposal that was submitted. And so we've got forensic specialists in our team from our New Orleans office who were included in the process and participated in the interview process with your committee. And so, I mean, it is true that we have participated in audits of PUB in the past, nothing with respect to the scope of the type of services that have been requested.
And Mr. Anderson, is there going to be any overlap in the anticipated services that would be performed in this audit that have already been performed by your firm previously as part of the services you were engaged for by PUB?
There's none that I'm aware of. If we what was proposed in the forensic process and the procedures that are included there in your contract, those types of procedures were not part of the scope of an independent audit. You know, JP, you may interject with what's involved in the process and what was requested by the RFQ, but those are not the same type of procedures.
Sure, whoever you referenced, if they can answer as well, that'd be helpful.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. JP Tujak out of the New Orleans office of CRI. I'm the forensic partner on the engagement, and that is forensics and litigation is primarily what I do. I'm a specialist for the firm itself, and most of the procedures, in fact, all of the procedures will be run under my direction. But in audit that CRI and the predecessor companies or company had previously been involved in was a financial statement audit for the most part, looking at fair representation of amounts listed in your financial reports, your CAFRs. This is something completely different and follows its own path with its own objectives as laid out by you all in the RFQ. So to put your question to rest, there is no overlap.
But you did evaluate also the Tenasca project, even though it may have been Long Chilton, or maybe it was your predecessors or a different team within Carr Ingram, correct? It was part of your overall evaluation of the company itself.
The type of procedures laid out or listed in the RFQ and their objectives would not be the part of any financial statement audit. It's just, those things are not contemplated. And Quentin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's completely different objectives.
Yeah, I would agree that, you know, the overall financial audit process doesn't involve the procedures that were requested in the RFQ and have a completely different scope and objective. An audit process is involved in rendering an opinion on financial statements, not on any specific element of a financial statement. And these procedures are focused directly on a process that involves a lot more than financial reporting.
Okay, thank you. And I would just ask if there is an affirmative vote of the commission on this, if there is any instance where you come upon any documentation where your firm may have worked on previously, I'd appreciate that disclosure. Okay?
And Mayor, Commissioners, I actually drafted a conflict of interest clause in our agreement that states that, and they have 3 days upon notice of that conflict to report it. If they don't, that's a material breach.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is there a projected turnaround time for how long this will take?
Estimated 4 months.
Very good.
Okay, any other questions? We do have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
We have 1 nay. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, consideration and action on resolution number 2021-081, providing for a transition and appointment process that will lift the temporary suspension of certain provisions of section 4.02 of the Greater Brownsville Incentive Corporation's bylaws and amending certain provisions of section 4.02 and 4.04 related to member qualifications and presentation of quarterly reports. City Manager's Office, and this was tabled from the November 2nd, 2021 regular meeting.
To remove from the table.
I'll move to remove from the table.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Commissioners, I promise that this is the last item I'll talk about today. There's no executive session either. But yes, we did have this presented or slated for the last meeting, but we wanted to make sure that everybody participated in the discussion. Everybody knows the history that City Commission came on to serve onto the GBIC board with the intent that it would be 1 year and then some roll off. This plan presents a process for that to happen, to occur. Generally, the lifting of that suspension, which is, and we talked 402's saying that the number and qualifications of GBIC, it refers to having only one member be a city commissioner. And so that rule has been suspended. So this talks about the gradual lifting of that suspension to provide for a smooth transition back to routine, the way it was intended to be. So it'd be every 3 months to GBIC board members would be replaced. When the last member rolls off, GBIC would conduct an organizational meeting that will mark the initial term of all new appointees, despite having served during that transition period. Then those board members will draw straws to determine which of those 3 members will receive an initial term of 3 years to stagger terms. The other provisions go to, there's discussion on 402, Section 3, which currently allows only 1 commission member to serve on the GBIC board. I know that there is discussion about removing that completely. That's in the resolution, but there's another option where it says that membership should not include commission members. However, a city commissioner may serve on the GBIC board if approved by a majority of the city commission, to still allow for some flexibility if that were to be the case in the future. We also put that we wanted some qualifications for the board members. And here are some that I listed just based on other cities: economic development and trail parks integration, financial services, international trade, workforce development strategies. And I actually think this is kind of reflective of the current composition of the board. Each one of these, somebody has a part in it right now. So seem to be good qualification standards. And then 404 would require quarterly reports that we had discussed before: project status, financial reports, strategy, and other reports that might be requested by the city commission.
And as I recall, Counselor did mention that if maybe sooner than 3 months, because what triggers the timing is the resignation, right?
Right.
Okay.
And the appointment.
The appointments, right?
Appointment.
The replacements.
Okay.
And I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Since my resignation and appointment of my replacement took place prior to the passage of this, does this still count as one of the 2 for group 1?
Yes.
Very good. And my next question, because the clock is based on when the replacements are appointed, in this case, we had 1 appointed last meeting, 1 appointed this meeting. Would the clock have started last appointment or with the following appointment?
On this appointment.
Okay. And that'll be the same in the future as well? If we only appoint 1 and the other commissioner's waiting to find their person?
Yes,
Clock doesn't.
just because the resolution considers that the two roll off together. And so whether one does it at 1 meeting or the next, as long as it's within that 3-month period.
But you haven't even attended a meeting.
But that's the roll off.
That's what
I'm talking about filling the vacancy. So let's say it's the 90th day, someone has to roll off, I'm resigning. But for the next month, I say I haven't made my pick yet, so I want to keep that vacant until I choose someone. So now we're not even starting the clock for the next roll off.
Yeah, that would be correct. I definitely, that would be an abuse of the process.
I agree.
It's not set up that way.
Hopefully we'll police ourselves on that if it comes to that.
Except that I honestly don't want to relinquish my seat. I don't see a problem with city commissioners being on the board. Similar to the whole PUB thing, I've been on the BEDC board and I got kicked off from the executive committee because I called them out that they were not doing their job. I got kicked out of GBIC and we all know about that story. So, I mean, I don't want to delegate that responsibility. I've called out wrongdoing on many occasions and I've suffered the consequences for it, but I'm okay with it. And so I don't want to delegate that responsibility. And the way this is being presented, it's forcing someone like me to get off of it or delegate that responsibility to someone else.
Well, Commissioner, I think if that were to come up, and I think, I mean, we certainly know your position, if that were to come up, then would that be, let's say, a reappointment possibly of Commissioner Galunski if that comes up? How can we address it?
And maybe the option at the end would allow for
If
that.
it's a majority of the commission, then she can stay on
Right.
based on that.
Right.
I've always spoken, I'm not in favor of any commissioner serving me or otherwise, so Commissioner Galunski knows that. But hey, it's a majority of the commission. If she wants that, I think it's fine, so long as we follow the.
And the reason why I present it this way is because ideally, the city commission by majority vote could amend the bylaws in the future. So this just kind of presets it without having to amend the bylaws. It still has the same standard that it would have to be presented, but it's not through the adoption, right? Like you could just do it as an appointment versus as an amendment to the bylaws.
Can I ask though, like, besides you don't think that a city commissioner needs to sit, like, what's the logic? Because
I've always said, Commissioner, and I like to stand by what I say. When I was running, I stated that I was not in favor of commission members serving on boards because I feel that there is, even though it may not be the case, I feel that it creates some sort of undue influence with the rest of the commission or the rest of the members that may be on the board. Like, let's say, for example, I'm the only commission member on GBIC. I feel that the other members may defer to me more so than they would other members just because I'm a commission member. So I kind of want it to just be neutral to where they serve at their own pleasure based on their own neutral opinions and not the influence of the commission. That's just my ideology. I mean, that's the way I feel about it.
only because like, and I came up, I wrote things down because I didn't want to forget. Since the city commission has taken over as the GBIC board, and since Helen has taken over as the executive director, we have seen unprecedented growth, and I attribute it to you, Helen, honestly. Because at BDC, just even think, I'm gonna take the industrial park on Paredes line. I was on BDC, never sold a lot, never had any movement. Helen, you're on board how many months? And you already sold like 4 lots. Kudos to you. The fact that you've already developed a little ecosystem of the space, and which is way above my head on top of that, but your predecessors had ample opportunity to do something, never touched it, and SpaceX was already here. So in that respect, I just don't understand we have a good momentum. Why do we want to derail it or impact it in any way by changing things? Because you're going to have a learning curve with new people. Think about all the other advisory boards that we have. It's like that phone game, right? The information trickles down in a different way when you have someone in between. This way we're directly involved, we know exactly what's happening, and we have a direct impact on what's happening. If we appoint people, it just makes it a little bit more difficult to go at the momentum that we're going right now.
I don't disagree, Commissioner. Actually, I mean, I think we've done a great job as a board for GBIC. I think Helen's done a good job as executive director as well. I just think that the purpose of having a committee like this, it's made up of members of the community, is for the diversity of opinion. And if we choose the right people with the right background, they are in essence an extension of us. But my opinion, hey, it's all good. If you want to serve, as long as the majority approves, that's fine.
No, and I'm in agreement with the mayor. I think the action the commission took when you all took it was appropriate, is what was needed. And part of the problem was the board members at the time, but part of the problem was the leadership within the organization. And I think to Commissioner Galansky's point, we've got good leadership there now. We've got a great staff. And the leader is building that team trust and that team dynamic. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of why we're seeing the success we're seeing right now. And I think we as individuals need to make sure that we're choosing someone who's like-minded as we are, that would go in there with the right intentions to do the right thing, be fiscally responsible, not about contracts for their buddies or contracts for themselves.
That's how BDC worked, and I'm sorry that your appointment is going back old guard, so that concerns me.
And I'll be honest, Commissioner, if I were to appoint someone and I see that they're not doing it right, or there's issues, I have no problem putting them on the agenda myself to remove them.
My comments are kind of in between, and having served on the BCIC board and loved every minute of it, and I had a very high functioning board, and I do not believe that they behaved differently because I was a commissioner. That was not the kind of board we were. But I also, I mean, quality of life is my passion. Economic development is, in this case, her passion. And I would have really hated not to be able to participate in that. On the other hand, it also depends on how I carried myself on that board. I did not make others feel that they needed to defer to me. I don't think that in this case, Commissioner Galansky would either. Having said that, I don't see the purpose of having more than one commissioner on either of those boards, because I've seen the harm that has happened by having more than one commissioner on both of those boards. And so I don't have an objection if a commissioner wants to serve on this board or on BCIC, but it should not be more than one.
And I want to make sure we just, currently, this is just for the GBIC board.
I understand. But my experience is not with GBIC.
I
My
understand.
experience is with these folks.
And when we've had problems with boards in the past where there was a commission member, part of the problem was the commission member, was it not?
Absolutely.
That's subjective response, but my subjective response is yes.
Absolutely. Not subjective.
So I've heard some as allowing one commission member, limited.
Had it actually before we
It's
put ourselves on,
right.
it was only one.
Not in Jubik though, or well,
No,
There was a problem on GBIC, so they switched it.
currently you're allowed to have one. The question is, do you want to keep it that way? Or do you want to go to something in between, which would be this, which would say no members unless it's approved by the city commissioner, which I would say that in itself, I think limiting it to one is more specific and more defined. You're leaving it to a future city commission, then they come in back later and say, hey, well, we could allow two commission members on the board. So if you want to keep it just status quo,
I don't think we've played very fair by these rules or the bylaws. Because we have made it that no commissioners can be on this, and then we have added the entire commission to be on it. So it really doesn't weigh very much with me, trustworthiness to say one or none, to add one. I think that the commission has not been very fair to the public when it comes to that. So that's just my opinion.
I think at the end of the day, the commission has every right to step in and take control of a situation that is not in control. And in my opinion, GBIC is the biggest tool we have to create change in our community. As you know, this is how we get out of our hole economically. And so I can see both sides here. I think if we're going to have a commissioner on there, it has to be the right commissioner. And obviously the majority will be in favor of that. So I'm in favor of having one.
so just having it to what it was before, just allowing only one.
Yeah, that's fair.
So with that, the way the resolution is currently drafted under section 2, not that we're there yet, I don't want to interrupt discussion, but whenever you're ready, if that's where the commission's going, it would be a motion to approve the resolution subject to reverting section 2 back to the status quo, which was one commissioner.
So in other words, it doesn't have to be a city commissioner, but it may be one city commissioner.
Right.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
So
I often work there.
I think the general consensus was that there would be approval of the resolution subject to revising the language to allow that one city commissioner may serve on the GBIC board.
all of that also provides for the timeline that so-and-so is going to roll out, or
Correct. All of the provisions would stay the same.
I can't look into the crystal ball and say that this is the right time, so that's what I don't like. How about each person individually decide when they feel comfortable about leaving?
Well, and that leaves it to the rolling off of 2 at a time. Like this last time, Commissioner Dos Santos and Commissioner Chetro decided they were going to volunteer. You could just wait till the end, or just now with the revisions, you could stay on
And at some point, you have to have faith,
as a reappointment.
you have to have faith in members of the public taking over.
No, because that's our responsibility. Even the Texas, the Development Act Code says that ultimately, and we know this because ultimately the city commission has to approve all decisions.
Right.
So whatever the GBIC board does, it's still subject to our review and our approval. So why add that extra layer and just do it right now?
I would say, Commissioner Galansky, you would still be able to, under this, the way the resolution would be adopted, you would still be able to serve.
Yeah, but I don't, or I just think it's adding an unnecessary layer then of
Understand.
things and maybe distorting the message too, or the information that we receive.
And I'm not sure that that's what the public is electing us to do, though, as far as be the ones serving on the boards that have major control. And that's my concern, is I think we heard that from constituents, and we know some of us campaigned on it, that we're not going to serve on boards. So my concern is, and I understand with regard to the law, we absolutely want to follow the law, but with regard to us making that decision that it's our responsibility and we should be the ones doing it, if that's not what the citizens elected us for, I think it's presumptive of us to assume that.
All right, do you have any, I guess at this point, the first portion seems to be palatable with everyone. The only issue is whether 4023 would go back to status quo, which is 1, or be with the proposed amendment here. So I'll take a motion either way.
I'll amend it to 4.023, being may include 1,
Okay,
but doesn't have to include 1, but it may.
okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Those in favor?
Talking about the whole thing or just that one section?
It's a whole thing with that revision, with the May.
Okay.
For those in favor,
Aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
May.
Who's nay? Pedro, Roy, no? Okay, so the motion passes.
4-3.
Our next item, board appointments. Item 1, consideration and action on resolution number 2021-082A to appoint 1 new member to the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation Board of Directors to fill existing vacancies. City Manager's Office.
This is tabled. Was it tabled at the last meeting? So then we need to put on the table, Counselor?
Yes.
Okay.
Move to remove.
Was it tabled or did she just ask it to be held over?
Let me see the agenda.
I know that it was deferred, but I don't know technically whether it was tabled or not.
I don't think we formally tabled it.
Well, it's just for procedure, we can get it out on the minutes and
Yeah, let's do it.
untabled.
We had a motion and a second to remove from the table. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Mayor, I'll move to appoint Linda Macias to the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation in my spot.
Okay, we have a motion for Linda Macias. Is there a second?
What's her background? Just qualification for this board?
She is a good person.
Has she applied? I know who she is.
Yes, she did apply. She has a very extensive background, not only in education services. She's not only a counselor, she works with the Idea Schools. She's a very strong education advocate. She has a very strong background in education. She's a very advocate member of our community. She's a very strong community advocate. And she's just an expert in child education. So I think she would be great on the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
And I know Linda and I love Linda. I'm just not sure she's got the right experience for this board. This is a big one, a big seat.
Hearing no second. Counselor, that motion.
Motion dies for lack of second.
Have another nomination? Commission?
At the time, that was my only appointment for District 2. So I'm gonna have to come back with it.
That's fine. I'd rather
Move to table.
Second.
a motion and a second table. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
I wanted a table.
Thank you.
Does it affect the timeline that you wanted or?
No, I don't.
Yeah, because the clock doesn't start until we fill that vacancy.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay though.
We still have 3 months to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two, some change.
Motion to adjourn.
Our motion to adjourn, is there a second? Motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Before 7, I'm impressed.
Right.
That's awesome.
There being no further business to come before the city commission, upon duly made motion, the meeting has adjourned at 6:51 PM.